Chapter 1. The Path to the Dome. Come with me a little way up the hill. The path is pale in the moonlight, laid with flat stones that have held the day's warmth only faintly now. Night has nearly gathered it all back. When you place your feet here, you may feel the coolness rising through the soles. A quiet reminder that the desert, for all its sunlit brightness, belongs just as deeply to the hours after dark. Above us, the observatory waits. It is not far. There is no need to hurry. The dome rests on the ridge like a rounded piece of moonlit stone, simple and still, as though it has always been here, keeping its own patient company above the open land. Around it, the desert extends in wide, silver-gray folds, dunes and low rock, and long, empty reaches where the wind can travel without interruption for miles. You can hear that wind now. It moves low across the sand with a soft, brushing sound, then lifts slightly as it reaches the hill, passing over the stones, the sparse desert grasses, the outer wall of the observatory. It does not press or demand. It only moves, steady and familiar, as if it has been making this same journey all night and many nights before this one. The air is cool enough that each breath feels clean and lightly edged. If you breathe in slowly, you may notice the faint mineral scent of stone, the dry clarity of sand, and beneath that, something almost sweet from the night-blooming plants tucked into sheltered places among the rocks. The desert keeps its fragrances close. At midnight, they seem to rise only for those who are willing to pause. So, we pause. For a moment, just here on the path, let the silence widen around you. Not an empty silence, but a spacious one. A silence with texture, wind in it, distance in it, the small sound of your steps settling, the hush of a world that has loosened its daytime edges and become gentler, less insistent, more willing to simply be. When I come here at this hour, I always feel that something ordinary has been set down behind me. The clocks of the day, the names of tasks, the bright and useful thoughts that carry us from one thing to another. Somewhere along the path, they begin to soften. Not disappear, only soften. As if the night asks very little except that we arrive as we are and allow our attention to grow quiet. Look up for a moment if you like. The sky is already full. Stars are scattered in such number that it is easier to feel them first as a brightness than as separate points. They rest above the desert with a calm steadiness, clear in the dry air. There is no city nearby to dim them, no passing noise to disturb the impression that the whole sky has leaned a little closer. And yet, the land below answers in its own way. The dunes hold moonlight along their ridges. The hollows between them are blue-gray and soft with shadow. Far off, the plain seems almost like a dark sea, unmoving now, though shaped by old winds and older time. It is easy in a place like this to feel that the earth and the sky are not opposites at all, but reflections in different forms. One made of stone and sand, the other of distance and light. We continue on. The path narrows near the top of the rise. Gravel gives a small, careful sound beneath each step. To one side, the slope falls away and the land opens wider. And to the other, the observatory wall comes nearer, its pale surface softly luminous in the moonlight. Up close, the stone shows its texture, smoothed in places by weather, rougher in others, cool and dependable beneath the passing touch of air. There is comfort in such solid things at night. A building like this does not separate itself from the landscape. It seems to grow from it. The dome above is quiet, closed for now, holding its instruments and shadows, and waiting stillness. Soon there will be lantern light inside, and the faint warmth of a room kept against the desert chill. Soon there will be the familiar nearness of walls, wood, kettle, cup, but not yet. For now, we are still outside, between the open plain and the shelter to come. This threshold begins before the door. It begins here, in the last few steps up the path, where the night is wide behind you and the observatory stands before you, and you are held gently between them. I like this moment very much. It asks for nothing. It is only a small suspension, a calm breath before entering. The wind slips once more around the curve of the dome. Somewhere in the dark, a tiny pebble shifts and settles. The stars remain where they are, bright and untroubled. The stone under your hand, if you rest your fingers there for a moment, is cool enough to feel almost like water held still. Now we have come to the door. It is wooden, thick, and worn smooth at the handle by many quiet arrivals. The frame is set deep into the observatory wall, making a pocket of shadow where the moonlight cannot quite reach. Here, the air changes slightly. The wind softens. The scent of stone deepens. Everything gathers inward. We do not open it yet. We simply stand here together for a little while, on the peaceful edge of the night, with the desert spreading silver behind us, and the silent dome above, and the first small feeling of welcome waiting just on the other side. Chapter 2. Warm cups in the midnight room. I ease the door inward, and the night follows us only a little way. Inside, the observatory is dim and patient. The stone that held the day's heat has now given most of it back to the sky, and the room carries that lovely in-between feeling, cool at the edges, faintly warm near the walls, as if the building itself is settling into midnight with us. When the door closes behind us, the wind becomes softer, no longer crossing the open ridge, but brushing around the dome in a low, familiar hush. For a moment, nothing more is needed than this small shelter. You can let your eyes adjust slowly, There is no hurry here. The room reveals itself in quiet pieces. A curved wall of pale stone, a narrow shelf with a few glass jars, a wooden table worn smooth by many resting hands, and beside it, 2 ceramic cups waiting in the lantern light. Their glaze is simple and matte, the color of sand after dusk. They seem to belong to the room as naturally as the stones beneath our feet. I strike a match, and the lantern wakes with a soft bloom of gold. Its light does not fill every corner. It simply gathers near us, making a small island of warmth in the midnight room. Shadows remain gentle and undisturbed along the dome's curve. The table glows honey brown. The cups catch a dull, tender shine. Even the air seems to soften in the lantern's presence, as though the room exhales and becomes more welcoming once a little flame is kept company. On a small iron stove, the kettle is already waiting. I set it in place and listen as metal meets metal with a quiet, settled sound. Then there is only stillness again, and the faint beginning of water warming inside. Not yet a simmer, not yet steam, just the earliest promise of it. In the silence, that small sound feels companionable, like a voice speaking from another room in a house where everyone is at ease. From the shelf, I choose the tea slowly, letting the ritual unfold at the pace of the night. One jar holds dried mint, cool and sweet even before it meets the water. Another carries chamomile, light as pale straw, with a scent like sun remembered gently. There is also a little desert sage, gathered far from the path, its fragrance dry and clean, touched by wind and stone. I lift each lid, and the room changes with each breath. The herbs rustle softly as I place them into the pot. That small sound has its own comfort. Leaf against ceramic, fingertips against glass, the wooden spoon laid down on the table. These are modest sounds, but they belong to a life that knows how to settle. Outside, the desert remains vast and silver under the moon. Inside, the world has narrowed kindly to lantern flame, kettle warmth, and the waiting cups. The water begins to murmur. It is a patient sound, rising little by little, never asking to be noticed, and yet impossible not to hear. I pour it over the herbs, and at once the pot breathes upward in a ribbon of steam. The scent arrives before the tea itself is ready. Mint first, fresh and clear, then chamomile, round and soft, and beneath both, the quiet, grounding note of sage. It mingles with the mineral coolness of stone and the faint, dry trace of desert air that entered with us when the door opened. For a few moments, we simply let it steep. This, too, is part of belonging. Not filling every silence, not reaching ahead, just allowing warmth to gather while the room holds us. The lantern flame gives a small, occasional flutter. Somewhere above, hidden by the closed roof, The telescope waits in its own stillness. The dome creaks once, not from effort, but from the slow settling of wood and metal into the colder hour. Everything here seems to know its place in the night. I pour the tea. The stream is steady and quiet, touching the cups with a rounded, familiar note. Steam rises in pale threads, visible in the lantern glow before disappearing into the dimness above us. When I place one cup into your hands, the warmth meets your palms at once. It is one of the simplest and kindest sensations in the world. Warm ceramic against cool skin, heat traveling inward without urgency. You do not have to drink yet. It is enough, at first, just to hold it, to feel the curve of the cup, to notice how naturally your shoulders loosen around that small warmth. The desert night remains cool beyond these walls, and some of that coolness still lingers in your sleeves, in your hair, in the breath you carry from the climb. But now there is this answering warmth, close and steady, and the body recognizes it immediately. I lift my own cup and take a first sip. The tea is gentle. Mint brightens it. Chamomile softens it. And the sage leaves behind a quiet, earthy note that feels as though it has come from the hillside itself. It tastes clean and unhurried. The warmth spreads through the chest in a way that has nothing to do with haste and everything to do with being met exactly where you are, by something simple and good. The room feels smaller now, though not confined. Intimate, perhaps. Sheltering. The observatory is no longer only a shape on the ridge, seen from the path beneath the moon. It has become a place with a table, a lantern, a kettle, a pair of cups. A place where the night can be welcomed rather than merely observed. Outside, the wind continues its low passage over sand and stone. Inside, steam lifts and disappears. And between the two, between the cool dark of the desert and this small circle of light, we begin, very quietly, to belong here. Chapter 3. When the roof opens, and from that quiet belonging, we let the room widen. The lantern continues its soft gold work along the stone wall. The kettle, now at rest, gives off only a little lingering warmth. Steam still rises from the cups in pale, delicate threads, carrying mint and chamomile and the faint, dry sweetness of desert sage. I wrap my hands around one cup for a moment longer, feeling the ceramic hold what the fire has given it. Outside, beyond the thick, curved wall, the night waits in its own patient way. There is one more small ritual before we look up. Near the center of the room, where the telescope stands beneath the closed dome, I set my cup down on the worn wooden table. The sound is slight, a soft touch of ceramic to wood. Then I cross the stone floor, slowly, as though not to disturb the settled air. The observatory has its own midnight hush now, familiar already. Lantern glow, cooling kettle, the scent of herbs, the faint breath of wind moving around the outer wall. Even the silence here has texture. It rests lightly on the skin. Above us, the roof is still closed, curved and pale in the dimness, holding back the open sky for just another moment. My hand finds the latch by memory more than sight. The metal is cool, touched all evening by the desert air held in the stone. When I lift it, there is no sharp sound, only a small and careful release, as if the dome itself has been waiting without impatience. Then comes the next motion, steady and unhurried. The mechanism answers with a low mechanical murmur, a gentle creak, a rolling weight softened by use and repetition. The roof begins to open. It does not rush. It glides with the calm certainty of something often done and never hurried. A seam of night appears first, narrow and dark, and then filled at once with starlight. The opening widens little by little. Cool air slips down into the room, touching the lantern warmth, touching the tea, touching the back of the hands and the forehead, and the tender space at the throat. The observatory seems to breathe out, and then breathe in again, this time with the whole sky entering. For a few moments, it is enough simply to watch the roof move. The curved panels travel aside with their patient murmur. The room changes as they go. Lantern light remains close and golden near the table, but above it, the darkness opens into a depth so clear and spacious that the eye relaxes rather than strains. The stone floor is still beneath our feet. The cup still waits with its rising warmth. Yet, overhead, there is no ceiling now, only the unbroken field of night. And there they are, stars, already present before we thought to look. Countless, steady, and quiet. Not scattered in confusion, but resting in their places, with a calm older than the ridge, older than the observatory, older than the dunes stretched silver below. Some are fine and faint, like grains of salt held in black silk. Others shine with a steadier brightness, enough to catch the eye and keep it for a while. Between them, the dark is not empty. It feels full in another way, deep, clear, and kind. The desert plain beyond the dome has become almost invisible now, though I know it is there. The long ridges of sand, the pale stone path, the sparse grasses bent by wind, all remain below the edge of the observatory. But with the roof open, earth and sky no longer feel separate. The same cool air moves over the dunes and through this room. The same starlight falls on the far plain and on the rim of your cup. The same silence holds both. I return to the table and lift the tea again. The contrast is gentle and perfect. Warm ceramic in the hands, cool night on the face, herbal steam rising upward into the open dome, as if it, too, wishes to join the sky. I take a slow sip, and the heat settles through the chest, while above us, the stars remain untouched, serene, continuing their quiet presence. This is one of the small timenesses of midnight here, that warmth and vastness can exist together without asking anything of one another. The wind enters differently now. Before, it moved around the observatory as a whisper outside a door. Now it comes down in softened threads, slipping through the open roof, carrying the clean mineral scent of stone and sand that have released the day's heat and grown cool again. It brushes the edge of the table. It stirs the lantern flame just enough to make the shadows breathe along the wall. Then it passes on, light and untroubled. The dome itself seems happier open, if a place can feel such a thing. Its creak has settled. Its curved frame holds the night without enclosing it. The telescope stands beneath the widening dark, still for now, waiting with its own patient attention. There will be time to turn it, time to look more closely, but not yet. For now, we let the sky be wide. We let the room be both shelter and threshold. We let the open roof remind the body of what the mind forgets so easily, that it can rest even in great space, that vastness does not always mean distance, that sometimes it feels more like being gently included. So we stand here a little longer, or sit, if that is softer, with the cup warming the hands and the cool air moving in slow currents around us. Above, the stars keep their quiet watch. Below, the desert keeps its own. And here in the middle, under the opened dome, the night grows larger, and our breathing follows. Chapter 4. The telescope turns north. And here in the middle, under the opened dome, the night grows larger, and our breathing follows. For a little while, we do nothing more than remain here and feel that widening. The lantern keeps its small gold circle near the table. The tea sends up a last easy thread of steam. Cool air drifts down through the open roof and touches the back of the hands, the forehead, the rim of the cup. Above us, the sky is so clear that it does not seem distant at first. It feels near enough to rest beneath, like another roof, only deeper and without edges. Then, when the moment is ready, I set my cup down on the worn wood and turn toward the telescope. It stands where it has been waiting all this time, quiet beneath the opening in the dome, its long body pale in lantern light and starlight together. One hand settles lightly against the smooth metal. The other finds a knob, then a wheel. There is no hurry in the touch. The instrument answers with the faintest resistance, then with a soft willingness, as though it, too, has been breathing with the room. A small shift, a measured turn. Somewhere inside, gears meet with a muted, careful sound. Not a click sharp enough to disturb the silence, only a low, mechanical murmur, steady and almost companionable. The telescope begins to move northward in a slow arc, and the motion is so patient that it feels less like directing and more like accompanying. We are not asking the night to reveal itself all at once. We are only turning a little, and then a little more. This is one of the quiet comforts of looking closely. Attention narrows, and in narrowing, it rests. The mind does not have to roam the whole desert, the whole sky, the whole long measure of time. It may settle instead on one wheel beneath the fingers, one line of metal, one patch of darkness framed by the dome. It may rest in the simple work of alignment. I make another small adjustment. The telescope lifts by degrees. Behind us, the kettle gives off its fading warmth. Near us, the tea waits in its sand-colored cup, fragrant with mint and chamomile, and the dry green trace of desert sage. Around us, the stone keeps the memory of day's heat, only faintly now, surrendering itself to night. And above, the stars remain where they have always been. Though each time we look up, it feels like a first meeting. When the telescope comes to stillness, I lean in. The eyepiece is cool. One eye closes without effort. The other receives a round field of dark, then a soft scatter of light. At first, it is only brightness and shadow, a few points trembling gently as the air moves. Then the view steadies. A shape begins to gather itself. This, too, is a kind of settling. Not the searching for something hidden, not the strain to identify, but the quiet allowing of forms to appear. The sky does not rush. It does not insist. It waits for a calm gaze. I step back and let you imagine the same gentle nearness, the same dark circle opening into distance. We turn a fraction more, and there, familiar without being ordinary, are stars that many nights have taught us to recognize. A patient line, a small cluster, a broad shape that seems to place itself across the darkness as simply as stones laid on a path. There is comfort in this familiarity. Constellations do not need to become stories unless you want them to. Tonight, they may just be shapes of light, easy to know, easy to leave unnamed. To look at them through the telescope is not to conquer their distance. It is only to let distance soften. A bright point steadies near the edge of view. Another waits farther off. Between them lies a darkness that is not empty at all, only spacious. The eye relaxes into that spaciousness. The breath does the same. Even the body, standing on the observatory floor, seems to understand that it need not hold itself so firmly. Stone underfoot, cool air at the neck, a little warmth still gathered in the chest from tea. This is enough. I adjust the focus by the smallest amount. The stars sharpen, not into hardness, but into clarity. Their light appears cleaner, more settled, as if a thin veil has been lifted from a window. It is a tender satisfaction, this small refinement. So much of night asks nothing from us except patience. A hand on a wheel, a pause, another breath. Then the image comes quietly into itself. Outside the dome, the wind continues over the ridge, brushing the sand and sparse grasses below. From here, its voice is softened by curved stone and open height. It passes the observatory, as it must have passed many nights before, while other hands made these same gentle adjustments, while other cups cooled on this same table, while the northern sky turned in its own untroubled rhythm. Perhaps that is why the movement of the telescope feels so calming. It joins us to something repeated and simple. Turn, pause, look, breathe. There is no demand to see everything, no need to name every brightness. Rest can live inside careful attention. Sometimes it lives there best. So we let the instrument continue its slow companionship with the stars. Another measured turn north. Another soft murmur from within its frame. The lantern glows low behind us. The tea waits nearby, warm still at its center. Above, familiar lights hold their places in the clear desert dark, and we meet them one by one, gently, as if greeting old neighbors across a quiet road. Chapter 5. Orion above the dunes. So we continue in that same quiet way, meeting the sky one shape at a time, until another familiar figure rises into our attention with such ease that it feels less like discovery than recognition. Orion is there above the dunes, clear and steady, as though he has been waiting just beyond the edge of thought. Through the open roof of the observatory, his outline rests in the dark, with a calm that belongs to old things, old stories, old patterns that do not hurry. I lift the warm ceramic cup again, and a little steam brushes my face before drifting into the cool air. Mint first, then chamomile, then the soft, dry green note of desert sage. The cup is warm against my palms, and beyond that small circle of warmth, the night remains tenderly cold. The contrast is comforting now. By this hour, it feels like part of the observatory's quiet language. Stone holding a little of the day's departed heat. Tea holding the warmth of the kettle. Wind carrying the cool breadth of the open plain. The telescope settles, and in its settledness, the room seems to settle too. The lantern behind us gives off its low gold light. The dome's curved edge frames a portion of sky so dark and clear that the stars seem not scattered, but placed. Orion stands among them in his familiar way, easy to trace even without naming each point. A shoulder of light, another at the opposite side. The line of the belt, so simple and sure. Below it, the softer glimmer that seems to hang like a small and patient breath in the night. Out beyond the ridge, the desert receives that pattern without comment. Long dunes lie silvered under the moon, their ridges and hollows running in patient lines across the plain. When I look from the constellation to the sand and back again, they begin to resemble one another in the quietest sense. Not in exact shape, not in any need to match, but in their shared way of enduring. The stars hold their distances. The dunes hold their curves. Both are shaped by time too large to feel all at once. The wind moves over the observatory and down the slope with a low whisper, touching stone, brushing the open roof, passing lightly over skin. Somewhere below, it skims the sand and leaves no lasting mark that we can see from here. Though by morning, the surface of the dunes will have shifted in delicate ways. That, too, belongs to this place. Nothing rushed, nothing abrupt. Only the long, almost invisible work of night, of air, of distance. I like Orion best in a place like this, where there is so little to interrupt him. No city glow softens his edges. No window glass stands between eye and sky. He appears over the desert as if he belongs not only above it, but also somehow within it, mirrored in the dark folds of the land. The belt might be imagined in 3 pale stones, laid one after another on the path below. The lifted arm might echo a dune crest, catching moonlight along its thin, bright edge. The wider body of the constellation might be felt in the broad sweep of open ground stretching away from the hill. And because the desert is so open, the mind does not need to hold the whole image too tightly. It can let the shape loosen a little. Orion can be a figure, then only a pattern, then simply a gathering of lights suspended over sleeping sand. The dunes can be ridges, then shadows, then a single breathing expanse of earth. It is restful to allow things to become simpler in this way, to let the known remain known and still soften at the edges. I set the cup down on the worn wooden table, and the small sound of ceramic touching wood seems very gentle in the large silence. Nearby, the kettle has gone quiet. The lantern flame gives a slight flutter and steadies again. The telescope waits without impatience, aimed upward, its pale body receiving a little starlight along its frame. Even the observatory stone feels attentive. The floor beneath our feet is cool now, though deep in it there lingers the memory of sun. Above the dunes, Orion keeps his place. There is comfort in that, not because he never changes. Through the seasons, through the turning of the earth, he rises and departs, like all things in the sky. But because his return is so faithful, he comes back to these hours. He comes back to these winter-clear nights. He comes back to people who step out under darkness and lift their gaze. For a long time, on many kinds of ground, others have looked up and found the same simple arrangement of light. A few bright points, a line across the middle, a figure held together by attention and memory. Perhaps that is why the dunes seem to answer him. They too are made visible by light and remembered by shape. They too are ancient without needing to speak of age. They lie under moon and starlight, as they have for uncounted nights, receiving each darkness, each wind, each pale dawn, and then returning again to stillness. Orion above, sand below. Between them, this small observatory of stone and wood and warm tea. We rest there for a while, saying very little, breathing in the herbs, breathing out into the cool air, letting the wind pass, letting the stars remain where they are. And as the telescope holds its quiet line toward that familiar figure, it begins to feel as though the sky is not so much above the desert as gently accompanying it, the two of them keeping the same long watch together, each in its own patient form. Chapter 6: A Silver Edge of Planet Light. And after resting for a while with Orion above the dunes, it feels natural to let the telescope drift a little farther, away from the familiar shape of a hunter and toward something simpler, smaller, and steadier. I set my hand lightly on the instrument again. The metal has cooled beneath the open roof, though not completely. It still holds a trace of the room's gentler warmth, as the stone floor does, as the ceramic cup does when I curl my fingers around it between one adjustment and the next. The gears answer in their soft, measured way. A faint murmur, a patient turn. Nothing hurried, nothing abrupt. Above us, the sky remains clear and dark and full. But now attention narrows, kindly, to a single bright presence, waiting a little apart from the star fields around it. I lean to the eyepiece and let the view settle. There it is, not flashing, not calling for notice, only shining with a calm that seems older than language and simpler than thought. A planet, bright enough to hold its place at once, bright enough that even before the eye fully rests, it offers a kind of quiet certainty. Around it, the dark is deep and velvety. Near it, a few smaller lights remain, but they soften at the edges of attention. This one does not ask to be understood. It asks only to be seen. For a moment, that is enough. The lantern behind us keeps its low gold circle over the table and the cups and the little stove where the kettle has gone still. The scent of tea lingers in the room. Mint first, then chamomile, then that dry, gentle note of desert sage that seems to belong equally to herb and hillside. The wind enters through the opened dome and passes over the observatory stone with a whisper so light it almost seems imagined. Yet the planet remains unchanged by any of it, poised in the eyepiece with a pale steadiness. When I look a little longer, I begin to notice that it is not only a point. There is shape there, delicate and quiet. A silver edge, a small, luminous curve, as if a drop of light has been held very carefully against the dark and has not spilled. It is not sharp in a harsh way. It is soft, almost tender, and because it is small, the mind can rest inside it without strain. Sometimes the largest spaces are easiest to meet through the smallest things. A whole desert can be felt in one cool breath at the observatory door. A whole night can be gathered in one cup warming the hands. And now, a vast distance, almost beyond imagining, arrives as this little silver edge suspended in blackness, serene and complete in its own far-off way. I step back and lift the cup for a sip. The tea has cooled a little since it was first poured, but that too has its comfort. Warm rather than hot. Herbal, soft, familiar. The rim of the cup touches the lip of the night, as neatly as the planet touches the dark. For a few breaths, there is no need to separate one sensation from another. The warmth in the hands, the coolness on the face, the faint creak of the dome, the dry sweetness of sage, the pale curve of distant light. Then I return to the eyepiece. The planet is still there, exactly as before. And there is something deeply easing in that. So much in a day asks to be followed, solved, remembered, arranged. But this light does none of those things. It simply remains. It keeps its place without effort. It offers no message beyond its own quiet presence. And perhaps that is why a planet can feel, at this hour, almost like companionship. Not the close companionship of voices in the same room, though there is that here too, in the shared tea and the sheltered stone, and the sense that you and I are keeping watch together. It is another kind, a distant companionship, one that asks nothing and yet gently answers something unspoken. To look across such space and find a steady light there can make the night feel less empty, less like an expanse to cross, and more like a wide, inhabited stillness. Outside, the dunes lie silvered under the moon, their long backs and shallow hollows holding their own patient forms. Inside, the observatory keeps its small circle of warmth. Between the two, beneath the open roof, the telescope stands like a quiet bridge. Its body rests on the stone floor. Its lens opens upward. Through it, one distant brightness enters the room without sound. I like to think of that light traveling all this way only to arrive gently, with no more disturbance than steam rising from a cup. You do not have to hold the image tightly now. It is enough to let it glow somewhere in your awareness. A pale edge, a calm brightness, a little silver curve afloat in darkness. If the details blur, that is all right. The feeling of it remains. Steady, cool, companionable. The wind moves again, brushing the rim of the dome, crossing the back of the hand, slipping over the warm cup and on into the room. The lantern flame gives the smallest flutter and settles. The telescope does not move. The planet waits in its place. And the longer we look, the less it feels like looking out at something remote, and the more it feels like resting beside a quiet presence that has been there all along, shining softly over the desert, over the stone, over this midnight hour, as if distance itself could be gentle. Chapter 7. What the Stone Remembers. Distance itself could be gentle. Here, even the stone seems to know that. If you lower your gaze from the silver edge of the planet, from the open roof and its calm field of stars, you come back to the observatory in another way. Not only as a room, or a shelter, or a place from which to look upward, but as something older in feeling. The walls around us are quiet now, their pale surfaces dim in lantern light. The floor beneath our feet has cooled fully into the night. The steps at the doorway, the curved base of the dome, the ledge where a hand naturally comes to rest, each one holds the hour without effort. I like to think that stone remembers by staying, not in words, and not as we do, gathering moments one by one and turning them over in the mind. Its memory is slower than that. It is held in temperature, in smoothness worn by touch, in the faint grain left by wind, in the way a wall gives back the day's heat long after sunset, and then gradually releases even that, until midnight settles all the way through it. When I place my palm against the observatory wall, I can still feel a trace of what the sun gave it many hours ago. Not warmth exactly, more like the memory of warmth, a softness hidden inside the cool. The desert understands this kind of remembering. All day, the ridge gathers light. The stones along the path, the broad plain below, the outcrops standing quietly among the dunes. They receive the sun in silence. Then evening comes, and moonlight replaces brightness with silver. The wind moves over everything. The heat leaves little by little, and still the land does not seem empty of what has passed. It feels full of it, though gently so, as though each day remains for a while inside the earth, not as a burden, but as a calm afterglow. This observatory was built from that same patience. The blocks of stone in these walls seem almost to have risen from the ridge itself. In the lantern's low gold light, they carry the same pale color as the path outside, the same dry softness as the hills under moonlight. Even indoors, with a warm ceramic cup resting between the hands and the scent of mint, chamomile, and desert sage still lingering in the air, there is no true separation from the land below. The room is not apart from the desert. It is the desert, gathered and shaped into shelter. Perhaps that is why it feels so restful here. The telescope turns. The dome gives it small, familiar creak. The wind brushes the opening overhead and slips along the curved stone. Tea cools slowly in the cup. These things happen night after night, and the observatory receives them all, noticing nothing, resisting nothing, simply keeping them. The floor has held the sound of many quiet footsteps. The threshold has known many pauses. The wall beside the table has watched lantern light bloom and dim, until such rhythms become part of its stillness. If you listen now, you can almost sense that stillness as a presence of its own. Not silence alone, though there is plenty of silence here. More a settled feeling, as if the room has grown accustomed to being awake at this hour, as if it has learned the shape of midnight. The low stove gone mostly quiet, the kettle at rest, the measured breath of someone looking upward, the occasional soft setting down of a cup on wood, the whisper of sleeves, the faintest movement of air across stone. Repetition has made the place tender. There is comfort in that. So much in the world asks to be new, to be noticed, to announce itself. But stone has another way. It becomes itself more fully through endurance, through weather, through waiting, through being touched lightly, again and again, over long seasons. The step at the door is smoother in the middle where feet have crossed it. The edge of the table has darkened where hands have rested. The floor near the telescope bears a quiet sheen where standing and turning have worn it down. Nothing dramatic, only care made visible by time. And beneath this observatory, beneath the cut blocks and fitted walls, the older stone of the ridge continues downward into the sleeping earth. I sometimes imagine the whole hill keeping watch with us, the dome above opening to the stars, the telescope lifting its narrow gaze, and below it all, the desert holding steady in its ancient body. Sand drifts and reshapes itself. Wind changes course. Constellations wheel from season to season. Yet, under these movements, the stone remains, patient and receptive, carrying the memory of sun, moon, cold, and countless nights of clear sky. You can rest against that patience for a while. Let the soles of your feet feel the firmness of the floor. Let your shoulders sense the quiet support of the wall if you lean back. Let the cup warm your hands while the air cools your face. Above, the stars continue in their own measured way. Around us, the observatory keeps its calm. And below, the ridge bears us without asking anything in return. The longer we stay, the more the room seems to settle around us. Not enclosing, only holding. Stone under lantern light. Stone under starlight. Stone remembering heat. Remembering wind. Remembering the soft, recurring ritual of midnight tea and lifted eyes. And because it remembers so slowly, it teaches the body to slow as well. To be here is enough. To sit within these pale walls, with the desert breathing beyond them, and the night opening overhead, is enough. The stone does not hurry the stars. It does not hurry the wind. It does not hurry us. Chapter 8. Wind Carrying Starlight. It does not hurry us, and neither does the wind. It moves around the observatory in the same patient way it moved over the ridge when we first arrived. Though now it feels nearer, more familiar, as if the night has let us learn its voice. It passes over the stone lip of the open dome. It slips along the curved wall. It brushes the back of the hand that rests around the warm ceramic cup. It touches the face lightly, then goes on, crossing the threshold between this small shelter and the wide desert below, without needing to choose between them. I sit with you in that quiet crossing. The lantern burns low on the wooden table, its gold light modest now, no brighter than it needs to be. The kettle has gone still. The telescope waits in its measured posture beneath the open roof, pale in the starlight, with only the occasional soft settling sound from its frame. Around us, the observatory keeps its cool stone calm. Above us, the sky remains clear and untroubled. And through everything, almost too gentle to name, the wind continues. At first, it seems only to carry cold. Then, after a little while, it feels as though it carries distance. Not emptiness exactly, more like the shape of open land, the long sweep of dunes, the wide plain beyond the ridge, the dry wash where stones hold moonlight in their shallow beds, the spaces between one hill and the next, and the spaces between one star and another. The wind passes through all of it and arrives here without announcing where it has been. It brings no message that must be understood, only a sense that the night is larger than the room, and the room is not separate from it. If you listen softly, the wind has many textures. At the edge of the dome, it makes a faint whisper, a careful sound, like fabric passing over smooth wood. Along the outer stone, it lowers into something hushed and steady. Farther away, over the sand, it loosens and widens until it is almost not a sound at all, only a continuous presence, something felt by the skin and the breath as much as heard by the ear. I lift the cup a little, and the last warmth of the tea rises with a thin breath of mint, chamomile, and desert sage. The steam is lighter now than it was before, less visible in the lantern glow, but the scent remains. It mingles with the mineral coolness of stone and the clean dryness of the night air. For a moment, it seems that the wind itself carries the herbs outward, taking a trace of the room into the dark. And perhaps it brings something back. Not dust, not cold alone. Something more delicate than that. The stars are so still overhead that they might seem untouched by movement. Yet the wind makes them feel nearer, as if their light does not stop high above us, but continues downward, thinning and softening as it falls, until it can be felt in the same way the night can be felt on the skin. The mind knows that light and wind are different things. But here, in this late and quiet hour, they seem willing to borrow from one another. The wind becomes a kind of touch for what is far away, a low current passing over the dunes, over the observatory roof, over your hands and mine. And in that passing, it gathers the silver of the open sky and lays it gently across the earth. I think this is why the desert feels so luminous at night, even where the moon leaves shadow. The sand does not shine in any bright way. The stones do not gleam. Yet, everything seems faintly outlined, softly held. The ridge, the path, the sparse grasses, the far undulation of the plain. Each one rests in a dim clarity, as though the wind has brushed starlight over their surfaces and left just enough for the eye to trust the shape of things. The dome gives a small creak. The telescope answers with silence. Somewhere outside, loose grains of sand shift against rock with a sound so slight, it almost belongs to memory more than hearing. The wind moves through that sound too, carrying it no farther than it needs to go. We remain here, in the middle of these small exchanges, cup and hand, air and skin, stone and night, starlight and sand. Nothing asks to be followed very closely now. It is enough to notice. The coolness at the brow, the rounded warmth of the cup, the faint herbal sweetness still resting in the room, the open roof above us, the long, invisible paths the wind makes as it enters, circles, and slips away again. After a while, even direction begins to soften. The wind comes from the dunes, then from the ridge, then from somewhere above, or so it seems. It moves across the observatory in slow, changing lines, and the mind no longer needs to map them. It can simply rest inside their passing. Each small current arrives, touches, and goes on. Another follows, another after that. No two are exactly the same, yet all belong to one continuous breath. I like to imagine that the desert has always known this, that the dunes, with their patient ridges and hollows, are shaped not only by force, but by repetition so gentle it can hardly be seen. A touch upon a touch, a whisper after whisper, night after night. The same wind that cools the stone, that lifts the edge of a sleeve, that passes over the lip of the cup, has also been crossing the open land for longer than any single watcher could remain awake to witness. And tonight, it crosses the stars as well, at least in feeling. It gathers what is above and what is below into one quiet field. So we sit a little longer. The lantern glows. The cup rests warm in the hands. The stone stays cool beneath our feet. And the wind, carrying its faint suggestion of distance, of silver, of open space, moves through the observatory as though it has always known the way, as though the night itself were breathing slowly around us and through us and on into the dark. Chapter 9. The last pour before dawn. The night keeps breathing that way for a long while, and after some time, so quietly that it hardly feels like a new action at all. I reach again for the kettle. By now, the observatory is fully familiar in the dark. The table stands where it has always stood, worn smooth at the edges by hands and cups and patient waiting. The lantern gives its low gold circle without effort. The stone beneath our feet has cooled into a steady, dependable calm. Even the small sounds seem to know their places. The faint settling of metal, the soft touch of ceramic against wood, the whisper of wind passing through the open roof and along the curve of the dome. I lift the kettle and feel its gentle weight. There is still warmth in it, enough for one last pour before dawn begins its slow, unseen approach somewhere beyond the eastern edge of the desert. Not yet light, not yet morning. Only that deep middle hour beginning to loosen, almost too subtle to notice. As if the night has stretched itself wider and thinner, the tea falls into the cup in a narrow, quiet stream. Steam rises at once, pale in the lantern glow. Mint comes first, cool and green even in warmth. Then chamomile, soft and rounded. Then the faint, dry sweetness of desert sage, as though the hillside itself had leaned near the cup and left a little of its scent there. I wrap both hands around the ceramic and feel the heat arrive slowly, not all at once, but in a patient exchange between cup and skin. This warmth is smaller now than it was earlier in the night, and somehow dearer for that. A small warmth in a large stillness. A simple thing held carefully. Above us, the roof remains open, and the sky is still clear in every direction the dome allows. The stars have shifted, though they have done so with such grace that the movement feels less like travel than like breathing. What was overhead is now leaning westward. What waited lower has climbed. The dark between the stars seems softer than before, as though distance itself has relaxed. The telescope stands nearby, turned and resting after its patient hours of looking. From time to time, it gives the faintest creak as the air changes around it. Its pale body catches a little lantern light, a little starlight, and keeps both without preference. I do not hurry to look through it now. It is enough to know it is here with us, steady on its mount, aimed into the same quiet that fills the room. The wind enters, as it has all night, over the ridge and through the opening above. It brushes the stone lip of the dome, moves down along the wall, touches the back of my wrist where it rises above the cup. Cool air, warm cup, dry night, soft steam. These small contrasts have become so familiar that they no longer feel like opposites. They belong to one another. Each makes the other easier to notice and easier to rest inside. Outside, beyond the observatory, the desert lies silvered and nearly without edge. Dunes, washes, pale rock, low brush, everything reduced to quiet shape and tone beneath the moon and stars. In the first hours of night, the land seemed wide. Now it feels wider still, not because it has changed, but because the mind has stopped trying to measure it. The same is true of the sky. There is no need to follow every star, no need to name what passes from one part of the dome's opening to another. The night does not ask for that kind of attention. It asks only for company. So we sit with it. I take a slow sip. The tea has deepened as it rested in the kettle. The mint is gentler now, the chamomile fuller, the sage more lingering. Its warmth moves through the chest like a small lantern being carried down a long hallway. Not bright, not dramatic, just enough to show that the space is kind. The dome gives a soft, answering creak somewhere above, and then settles again. Stone holds its silence. The wooden table holds the lantern, the kettle, the second cup waiting nearby. The wind passes, returns, passes again. If I listen closely, I can hear the almost sound of the desert beyond the walls. Sand shifting somewhere far below, dry grasses touching, distance arranging itself in the dark. Everything that belonged to the earlier hours is still here, only lighter now. The cup, the herbs, the roof opening to the stars, the telescope, the pale stone, the ridge, the wind, but the edges of things have softened. The room no longer feels separate from the night around it. The observatory is simply one more quiet shape beneath the sky. One more place where warmth gathers briefly in the midst of cool, open space. Perhaps this is what the last pour offers. Not a finality, but a gentling, a loosening of the wish to hold each image clearly. The cup is warm in the hands, and then only warmth. The wind touches the face, and then only coolness. A star catches the eye, and then only a sense of light suspended in great calm. Thought itself becomes less solid, less eager to arrange and keep. Another sip. The steam rises and disappears. The lantern flame moves once, very slightly, and steadies. The telescope waits without impatience. Above, the stars continue their slow turning, and below them, the desert keeps its long, silver quiet. The stone around us remains faithful to the hour, giving back no more and no less than shelter, stillness, and a place to rest between earth and sky. And so the tea grows lighter in the cup. The night grows wider around it. And everything, little by little, begins to feel as though it could simply float there. Warm ceramic in the hands, cool air at the brow, wind at the roof, stars overhead, stone beneath, held without effort in the deep and tender hush before dawn. Chapter 10. Suspended between earth and sky. And everything, little by little, begins to feel as though it could simply float there. Warm ceramic in the hands, cool air at the brow, wind at the roof, Stars overhead, stone beneath, held without effort in the deep and tender hush before dawn. So I let it remain that way. There is no need now to adjust the telescope, or tend the kettle, or rise from the chair beside the worn wooden table. The lantern still gives its small gold light. The cup still rests easily between both hands. The tea has cooled enough to sip slowly, and its scent is softer now than before. Only a faint thread of mint, chamomile, and desert sage lifting through the air when the cup is raised. Above us, the roof stays open. The dark circle of sky is clear and patient. Stars keep their places with that quiet certainty they have always had, though the earth turns and the hours pass beneath them. Nothing in their light asks for anything. They shine, and the desert receives them. The observatory receives them too. Its pale stone walls and curved edges touched by a dim silver from above and a dim gold from within. Between those two lights, we rest. The wind moves through the opening in the dome and slips along the stone floor in a way that can barely be heard. It brushes the side of the cup. It cools the skin at the temple, the forehead, the back of the wrist. It passes over the telescope's still body, over the lantern glass, over the old table, and then out again into the wide country of sand and rock and low sleeping brush. Nothing interrupts it. Far below the ridge, the desert lies in long, quiet shapes. Dunes gather moonlight along their crests. Dry washes settle into shadow. Pale stones hold a little brightness. Everything seems both near and very far, as if distance has become gentle and easy, with no sharp edge to it. If you listen, you may notice how the night has thinned, not ended, not changed in any sudden way, only thinned as steam thins above a cup, as breath thins into stillness after a long exhale. The hours have worn themselves smooth. Even the familiar creak of the dome, the small settling sounds in the stone, the faint whisper of cloth when a sleeve shifts against a chair arm, all seem to arrive from farther away now. There is comfort in that. The cup warms the palms, though more lightly than before. The stone beneath our feet gives back only the memory of warmth. The air carries the cool honesty of the desert just before dawn begins thinking of the horizon. Yet dawn is not here. Night remains whole around us, wide and dark and kind. I take another sip, and then another long pause. Tea, wind, stone, stars. After so many quiet hours, these things no longer feel separate. The warmth of the cup seems to belong to the lantern. The lantern's glow seems to belong to the stone. The stone seems to belong to the ridge. The ridge belongs to the desert. The desert opens into the sky, and the sky, with all its distance, leans down into this one small room where a cup is held and a breath is heard, and nothing needs to be hurried. The telescope waits beneath the opening, no longer turning. Its lenses reflect a little dim light, then none. It has done what it came here to do, and now it rests as we rest. There is something soothing in the stillness of useful things when their work is complete for the night. The kettle, quiet on the stove. The spoon on the table. The herbs in their glass jars. The chair, the dome. The old floor worn smooth by uncounted steps. All of it at ease. And perhaps that is what this hour offers most gently. Not the sight of stars alone, though they are here in their number and calm brightness, and not the shelter of stone alone, though it holds the night so well, but the simple feeling of being held among them, held by the chair, held by the cup, held by the cool air and the warm room, held by the ridge above the sleeping plain, held by the dark overhead, immense and untroubled. There is nothing to solve in such a place. The mind can loosen, as the hand loosens around an emptying cup without letting it fall. Thoughts may come and go with the wind, brushing lightly through and then passing on over the dunes. They do not need to stay. They do not need to finish themselves. The stars ask for no account of them. So we can sit a little deeper in the quiet. We can feel the night on the face, the cup in the hands, the stone under everything, the open roof above, the slow turning of the world, so subtle it is only known by the drift of constellations, and the almost invisible change in the dark to the east. Even that change is still only a thought at the edge of the land. For now, there is this: a little warmth, a little wind, a little gold light, a great field of stars, and the soft sense of being suspended, not nowhere, but exactly here, between earth and sky, between breath and silence, between the last sip of tea and the next unmeasured pause. The observatory keeps its watch. The desert keeps its watch. The heavens keep theirs. And in the open dome, the night goes on. The wind passes once more through the room, carrying the dry sweetness of sand and stone. The lantern flame gives a small, steady glow. Somewhere beyond sight, the dunes continue their patient shapes beneath the stars. The cup grows lighter in the hands. The silence grows wider. And above us, still and unending, the sky remains.